As I like to say, soul's got soul. I've been doing business here in Korea since 2004. Acquired a company called Itemania in 2005, and eventually a company called Item Bay. For any of you that play games, we had over 90% market share for all game item trading, and so I was doing $1 billion a year here in Korea for a very long time, and that's played a big part of my life. So I think of Korea as one of my second homes. So always good to be back. Thank you for having me. So I've been in the games industry, buying and selling and trading and making markets for in-game assets since 1999. I obviously got into crypto early on, started many companies. One of those was Mastercoin. We invented the ICO, started the first venture capital fund called Blockchain Capital. We've been the most active investor in the ecosystem since 2013. Started Tether. We put the first real-world asset on the blockchain. We're doing about $2 trillion a year in transaction volume. It's the second most traded token after Bitcoin. Obviously, chairman of the Bitcoin Foundation. Created the first security token with BCAP. Raised our third fund as an experiment a little over a year and a half ago. In I think about 16 minutes from 800 LPs. And more recently, helped start Block 1 into EOS, which was the largest ICO. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the industry, where we started, how we got here, and where ultimately we're going. So in the first few years, because of the sensational media and headlines, there was a lot of misconceptions around what Bitcoin was and what the enabling technology that we refer to as blockchain could do. So it wasn't until about the year 2014 where major financial institutions started to recognize the potential of the technology. They would say, Bitcoin bad, blockchain good, all sorts of interesting use cases. And so over the course of 2014, you saw the smartest and most well-financed financial institutions experiment with the technology. By the year 2016, you had seen more or less every major financial institution in the world experimenting with the technology, trying to understand what aspects of their business would be positively impacted and which aspects of their business would be negatively impacted. And clearly, it's going to do some of both. In the last 2 years, you've now seen lots of pilots, lots of experiments, but we haven't seen those pilots turn into real-world deployments in most instances because the technology has still been in a prototype sort of state where it hasn't been able to scale to deliver the use cases that have already been identified. That's all beginning to change now, and we're going to see real deployments by next year. This is a global phenomenon. This is very important from a financing perspective, specifically for everywhere in the world that is not Northern California. Capital formation has made it such that entrepreneurs in places like Silicon Valley have had a substantial advantage over everyone else in the world because they were closest to where the capital is. Now, because of the way that capital flow is being impacted by this, entrepreneurs anywhere in the world have, call it, an equal opportunity to innovate. As you've heard a little bit about supply chains, every industry is going to be impacted by this technology, much in the same way that the internet has. The industries that we're seeing first impacted have been finance, and that's because Bitcoin was a financial tool, and that was the first, call it, use case that other industries then tried to learn from. The second one, I think, is gaming. And this is why there's such a big opportunity here in Korea. Korea is the mecca of the online game industry. For the size of the population of being around 50 million people, it's the largest crypto market, relative to its size. And that's because of the gamers. I believe that we're at that sort of 1995 moment of the internet. So in the internet, the 1970s, the 1980s, the 1990s till the mid-90s were all that sort of prototyping phase. 1995 is when the consumer internet first emerged. It's when we had an internet browser, an email client. You needed the bridges, the roads, the tunnels, the basic infrastructure for that to have utility. The blockchain is now there. We can now build scalable applications that are fast for the first time. And I believe by this time next year, perhaps even in the next 6 months, we're going to see applications with over 1 million unique users a day. And I believe those first applications where we're going to see that happen with consumer dApps are going to be games. This is very much like when the iPhone first launched and the App Store first emerged. You know, we are in that moment. Or when Facebook opened up their platform and allowed third-party developers to access those user bases. The difference being is you're building on an open, decentralized, and distributed platform versus a centralized one where the owner of that platform may choose to make decisions that are not good for you as the third-party developers because it's best for their business model. Meaning these are going to stay open platforms where you don't have to worry about the platform trying to take too much of the pie, you know, like we saw with Twitter, for example. It's useful sometimes for people to see the financing sort of phase of the industry. You know, this industry only received its first investment in startups in 2012, and it was a de minimis amount of capital in a handful of deals. In 2013, VCs started to recognize that this may have potential. There was enough, call it data, that suggested that there might be something big happening here. But by 2014, this industry was bringing in capital very similar to the internet in 1995. By 2015, capital very similar to the internet in 1996. And entrepreneurs were voting with their feet faster than ever. And the quality of those entrepreneurs were only getting better and better. And in 2016, the VCs were saying, where are the exits? Where are the exits? Where are the exits? And there hadn't been any exits. And so you stopped seeing capital flow. But the quality of entrepreneurs kept increasing, and entrepreneurs being tenacious, you know, had to go figure out another way to be financed. They weren't going to walk away. And the ICO became the mechanism for doing that. You know, the first ICO having been that very small one we did with Mastercoin. And it was something that very few people were interested in other than as an experiment. Because if you could raise capital from the VCs, you often would. That was the preferred route. Ethereum was the first group that had the ability to raise capital from Andreessen Horowitz and Sequoia and all the top VCs, but said no because for the product they wanted to build, it needed to be decentralized. It wasn't until we saw the DAO where you had $150 million raised with no business plan, other than a business plan. You had no working product. That's when the smartest entrepreneurs in the world said, this is a viable alternative to venture capital. This actually might be a better solution than venture capital. It's less dilutive, there's more capital available, bigger projects and ideas can be pursued, and I think if anyone's been paying attention, this part has obviously been astounding. And so this chart is taking you to January of this year. Those numbers have since been decreasing, and that's because capital was flowing in a way that wasn't very rational. You know, projects were being overfunded, teams that didn't have necessarily the skills to execute. You know, the market has wisened up and said, we expect more from the entrepreneurs, and we're going to provide them with less capital, something that looks a little bit more like venture capital with milestone-based financings. And so we've been seeing that decrease. It hasn't stopped. There is still substantial money flowing, capital flowing that's still similar to that of the venture capital industry. That last chart was many multiples of what VC does. And that's because we as investors are expecting more. This data point also shows you how early we are in that development, back to that 1995 analogy. In 1999-2000, when the internet was at its peak, the public company stocks at that time were valued at 6.7 trillion at its peak. That was when this was a Western phenomenon, and that is a not inflation-adjusted number. I could make the argument that the market reached, call it $50 to $100 trillion relative to today, with it being global and inflation-adjusted. Cryptocurrencies are only at 200 billion. So we are still in the very, very early days. And we're about to see something massive happen next year, and that is the emergence of the security token. Instead of utility tokens, which I love, but most projects probably shouldn't be utility tokens, and for you to know what is best for your project, you only have to ask yourself one simple question. What is best for my users? What is best for my community? If you always do what is in the best interest of your community first, if you serve your users first, you do what's in the best interest of your community first, you will normally be doing the right thing. And generally, your users want rights, they want ownership, they want royalties, they want dividends, they want the things that would designate you as a security. And so security tokens are going to be a very, very big deal over the course of next year. I think it's going to be most of the big thing. We're going to see gaming applications and lots of security tokens. We're seeing the emergence of a quadrillion-dollar market, a quadrillion-dollar US dollar market. You know, 1,000 million is a billion, 1,000 billion is a trillion, 1,000 trillion is a quadrillion. Because we're watching the beginning of the securitization of all of the world's assets, from cryptocurrencies to fiat currencies, the world's debt market, the world's equity markets, the world's real estate, the world's supply chains. You know, we've never had a quadrillion-dollar market, so I can't think of a better place to be developing and building than in a market where you're seeing this type of growth potential. And so I put that next to the dot-com bubble at its peak, just to show how much growth and how much opportunity exists between, you know, the here and the future. Another thing that's worth noting, because it's often lost on people, is that the internet is broken. When the internet was first being developed, the cryptography was known to secure the internet, though we didn't have the computer processors at the time, and it was also the desire of many of the people building the internet that it would have a backdoor, that it wouldn't be secure. But fast forward to today, we've built all of the applications and everything we use on the internet on a faulty foundation. We've built on sand. And as we now need to have these things secured to do something more than just move information, we're running into more and more problems. And so the blockchain is providing the security layer that is going to upgrade the internet. It is my opinion that every single thing that is built on the internet today is going to be rebuilt using a new architecture, a new stack, in which blockchain is going to be a key component from a security perspective, if not more so. I mean, other uses depending upon the specific application. So when you talk about a quadrillion-dollar market of securitization using blockchain and the upgrading of the entire internet, you know, don't let this bear market get you down. There's lots of wonderful things ahead. I'm going to probably skip through this, but it's worth noting where the opportunities lie. The enterprise is going to be impacted in the, call it the developed world, but the big opportunity around like the financial inclusion use cases and a lot of the stuff that we talk about is really in the developing world. Because the need is in Latin America, the need is in Africa, the need is in Southeast Asia. Not really in the places where we all have bank accounts and credit cards. The big opportunity is for the 2/3 of the world's population that don't have access to basic financial services. If we were going to redesign Maslow's hierarchy of needs today, you know, access to a phone, the internet, and financial services would be, you know, essential to any high quality of, you know, to any quality of life. To have any opportunity. This system, you know, on the most basic level, is democratizing the global financial system in a way where, you know, the entire planet is going to have equal access. And the least fortunate billions of people stand to be the biggest beneficiaries. Where this is going to end also is very interesting, and that is that, you know, Asia's role in all of this. I mean, I'm an American that lives in Puerto Rico, but America only represents 4% of this market today. China, South Korea, Japan, you know, this is where the market is being led today. You know, you stand to be the biggest beneficiaries of this change right now. And I'm always glad to come and visit and continue to educate, because Korea has been leading the world in technology for a long time, you know, from gaming, which is driving a lot of this, to now blockchain and others. But I want to just close out on a couple of last items. One is that we have a lot of what I call, you know, Bitcoin maximalism or crypto maximalism. I find that to be very akin to religious fanaticism. You know, my chain is better than your chain. You know, we've learned over the last 3,000 years that that doesn't serve anyone well. My view is that if anyone changes the world and makes it a better place, we all win. And I have a little Winston Churchill quote there: a fanatic is one who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. But I like to ask, you know, the existential why we are here. We have an opportunity to design the future. We are making the decisions today that will determine, you know, the future of tomorrow. And if we're going to redesign our world, if we're going to make a new future, let's make it as good as we can. Let's make it a world in which everyone wants to live in. I'm going to skip through this sort of sacred geometry, except for one part as it relates to Eos. This is a chestahedron. This is the sacred geometrical shape of the heart. The decatria is the sacred geometry of the earth. Sacred geometry typically comes in duality. You'll notice they fit together. And the English word also does as well. I guess we'll get to that in a moment. Earth, H goes to the front, heart, earth. Anyway, I like to comment on this as well. I don't think that a billionaire is, you know, someone that has $1 billion. I believe in redefining terms. You know, a billionaire to me is someone that's positively impacting the lives of 1 billion people. And all of us working on projects in this space have the potential to be a billionaire by this definition. We are working on things that can truly positively impact the lives of the many. Changing the game. You know, most people are playing the game of compounding interest, the game of self-interest, the game of wealth accumulation. You know, I'm playing the game of compounding impact. How do we positively impact as many lives as possible? I like to tip my hat to Satoshi because it was a Japanese pseudonym, so I use a Japanese term, in this case, ikigai. This is figuring out what you're good at, what you love, and what the world needs. The intersection of those three things are your life purpose. Kaizen, get up every day and do the best possible work you can. Continually improve. And if you do that, you'll eventually be a superhero. We all have the potential to be superheroes. You know, and like Malcolm Gladwell would say, what are the things that you've invested 10,000 hours of your life into? Those are your superpowers. And go pay it forward with them. You know, we can go from building a world of me to a world of we. Dream. Teamwork makes the dream work. Let's evolve. Believe. Everything is possible. I'm going to close out on this last statement. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Stephen Hawking, I think, is the best way to close out. Stephen Hawking was an individual who found himself in a state of being where no one would have thought that he would have left and made a major impact on the world. If Stephen Hawking in his condition was able to do what he could do, it means you can do anything.
When we see the Earth from space, we see ourselves as a whole. We see the unity and not the divisions. One planet. One human race. We are not the same, but we are one. We are here together, and we need to live together with tolerance and respect. Our only boundaries are the way we see ourselves. The only borders, the way we see each other. We must become global citizens. Our voices are important. We give our elected officials their power, and we can take it away. Be involved. We are all time travelers, traveling together into the future. But let us make that future a place we want to visit. Be brave. Be determined. Overcome the odds. It can be done.
Thank you.